Oh, yeah! Mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts. How do we like our martial arts? We like it mixed! Yeah!
Hype! That's what we like to hear, because the UFC is back on pay-per-view. They're back in the Garden State for UFC 288, which goes down tomorrow at the Crew in Newark, New Jersey. The bantamweight title is on the line between the current champ, looking to further cement his legacy, and a returning former two-division champion looking to reclaim a title he never lost in an actual fight. That will be the second of two high-stakes 5-round matchups, and we're going to talk about that and much more as we welcome you to the UFC 288 preview show. We are live here on the MMAfighting.com YouTube channel. I am Mike Heck. We have the great José Youngs joining us from Phoenix, Arizona, along with my best friend, Alexander K. Lee, live in the Great White North. Thumbs are up everywhere, and that's what we like to see. So, gentlemen, we are a day away from this card. There's a thumbs down from Jose. And Jose, I want to start with you because I feel like this card, this main event between Aljamain Sterling and Henry Cejudo, it's been growing on people. More so for the questions and the intrigue surrounding it. The majority on the Cejudo side, which we're going to talk about due to the long layoff and other things. But to me, the initial first taste wasn't great. But over time and throughout this week, even with the cringiness of the press conference and other things, it's been evolving to something a little bit more. How would you gauge your hype level a little over 24 hours away from the card, the main event, etc.?
I mean, the card, I feel like the card has, how would I phrase this? There's been a lot of sneaky fights that I don't think people realized were happening. Like when I was like scrolling social media during the official weigh-ins, and like Marina Rodriguez stepped on the scale, and they're like, "Oh, Marina Rodriguez is fighting. Oh, Phil Hawes is fighting. Drew Dober and Matt Frevola are fighting." So I feel like a lot of, and rightfully so, the narrative has been surrounding the main event because it's for the bantamweight title, Henry Cejudo's return, and then the co-main event obviously came together like within the last few weeks. Gilbert Burns' third pay-per-view fight of 2023, and it's only May. Belal Muhammad, obviously, a lot of people think deserves the title shot, and now he's taking the short fight notice to prove the haters wrong. So I feel like obviously a lot of the attention is in the top two fights, but then there's been a lot of sneaky good fights like Jessica Andrade and Yan Xiaonan is very well could be a number one contender fight for Zhang Weili, and Kron Gracie's return after 4-year layoff. Charles Jourdain has literally never been in a boring fight in his life. Masvidal Evloev, who a lot of people I think forgot about because he's obviously injuries have kind of taken him away from us and his undefeated record. And obviously if Bryce Mitchell was on the card, then still fighting him, then it would be like hyper interesting. But there's a lot of very fun fights and a lot of very fun fighters that I don't think people were aware were on this card because of all the attention of the top two fights. So I think it will sneak up on a lot of people. And I think the last few fight nights haven't been the best in terms of star power. Obviously, the main events the last few fight nights have been very fun, but outside of that, it's been a lot of like, why is this fight happening on a co-main event or on the main card type situation? And I think after a while, fight fans they want another fun card, and this is a sneaky fun card. I don't think it's going to break pay-per-view records, but we should have fun from the first fight to the end fight, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, this kind of has I'm probably not going to buy it, but I could regret it the next day if I didn't sort of vibes to it. So, AK, where's your hype levels at? And where are you at with the UFC 288 gymnastics scale?
Let's go 9.2 for the degree of difficulty for this card. That's, again, I usually say pay-per-views start at a 9, a UFC pay-per-view that is. It'd have to be a pretty like deplorable cancellation-stricken card for it to fall below 9. And like Jose said, there is potential for excitement here, even though maybe it's not loaded with name power. We're only getting, the one title fight. It's one that wasn't really asked for. If you're talking about like who did people want for Aljamain Sterling, after he beat TJ Dillashaw. But I think like a lot of us, we've sort of talked our way into it. Mike, you and I have always been sort of against Henry Cejudo getting this title shot. if the fight happens, it's an intriguing fight. Henry Cejudo is one of the best, bantamweights / flyweights, lighter weight class fighters of all time. He's amazingly accomplished. He just didn't have the longevity. But like as far as watching him fight, we all have a lot of respect for him. It's just given the state of the division, it felt like there was a lot of other worthy challengers. And this goes back to the Dillashaw fight too. We didn't love that title fight either. So I don't know. Maybe after Sterling and Cejudo, after this business is settled, we can get back to normalcy. But we'll talk more about that fight. But the card overall, yeah, really, really good. I'll run a poll in a second about maybe I'll ask what is the most highly anticipated fight outside of the top two. Maybe outside the top. Maybe I even have to go outside the main card because there are some sleepers, and it could really hit that 9.2 score if they have some of the luck they had with debuting fighters last weekend. Because I think Ikram Aliskerov, Braxton Smith, Rolando Bedaya, all these guys could impress. Diego Lopez in a bit of a tough situation, but other than that, yeah, I think you have a nice top three, I would say. And then some intriguing things. How can you not be curious how Kron Gracie looks after a layoff of 1,300 days? So there's potential here for this to be memorable.
So let's dive into this main event. Jose, we'll start with you because we have Aljamain Sterling, who, at least to me and a lot of other people, one of the more underappreciated champions that we've had in a long time. And I understand that it's been a very weird title reign, won the belt in a way that nobody's really ever won the belt before. The title defenses, the fight with Jan was what it was. The Dillashaw fight was super weird because of the shoulder injury to TJ Dillashaw. So it has been a weird ride since he got the title shot with Petr Yan in the first place. No doubt about that. But he takes on Henry Cejudo, comes back to an immediate title shot after a little over 3 years away. Man, there are a lot of questions about this fight, a lot of unknowns when it comes to Henry Cejudo, isn't there? What are some of the big questions you have right now, whether it be on the Cejudo side or maybe it's on the Aljo side?
Well, for Henry Cejudo, like we were talking about this on the official weigh-in show, like I asked Casey and AK this, and we all kind of came to an agreement that just by default, Aljamain just might have the best MMA wrestling that Henry Cejudo has faced inside the octagon. Obviously, he's fought a lot of high-level opponents, like Marlon Moraes is a very talented striker. Dominic Cruz is the greatest bantamweight ever. TJ Dillashaw is an incredibly well-rounded mixed martial arts. But a lot of these guys, especially, Dominic Cruz, the long layoff, Marlon Moraes, that win hasn't aged especially well. TJ Dillashaw was compromised coming down to flyweight. Demetrius Johnson, fought on one knee, and a lot of people think DJ won. So I think this is really the big question is which guy can really legitimize themselves. It's by no fault of their own. Their last few wins, even as champion, there's just been murkiness surrounding them. Like you mentioned, all the Aljamain stuff, and obviously the disqualification, the close fight against Petr Yan, the injury to TJ Dillashaw, Henry Cejudo's, everything I just mentioned. So the big question I have is whoever wins this, whoever emerges as the undisputed bantamweight champion of the world, do they legitimize themselves in the eyes of fans and kind of erase the questions of the past? It kind of reminds me of like when Tyron Woodley was the champion and everyone had all these questions, like all the guys he fought were washed and this and that, and then he goes out there and just melts Darren Till, and all of a sudden we're talking about, is Tyron Woodley the best welterweight of all time? Same as Kamaru Usman. A lot of people thought, after the foot stomping incident with Jorge Masvidal on Fight Island, a lot of people called him boring. They were booing him at press conferences. He goes out there and absolutely melts Jorge Masvidal, and it just erases all of the questions and negativity surrounding them. So my biggest question outside of X's and O's, because I'm the wrong person to ask for that, is which one of these fighters really does legitimize themselves as the undisputed champion?
AK, what was interesting about the press conference yesterday was something we haven't really seen before. Aljamain Sterling was getting cheered like a hero, and Cejudo was getting booed. Like, Aljamain was the babyface. When I was in freaking Jacksonville, Florida, Jose, you were there. In Jacksonville, Florida, Petr Yan was treated like he was a god, and Aljamain Sterling was treated like just the worst human being on the planet. But now the babyface heel roles have sort of flipped a little bit. Cejudo has kind of leaned into being a heel, but it's been a long time since I've seen such a positive reaction for Aljamain Sterling. So what are some of the big questions you have about this fight? Is it on the Cejudo side? Is it on the Aljo side? And just the fight overall?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see Aljo getting that kind of reception. He has kind of been booed in some weird places, and again, we talked a lot about the strangeness of his championship reign and why it's just rubbed people the wrong way, whether it's his fault or not. Again, the DQ, the split decision with Jan in the second fight, Dillashaw beating up a one-armed man, and TJ Dillashaw in his last title defense. None of that's his fault. None of that's his fault, but there's just a lot of people who are like, well, this title reign is tainted by all these various things, and it's not his fault. Hey, listen, if he couldn't get cheered in Newark, which I had to do a quick check, is like 2 hours, like a 2-hour drive from Uniondale, from his stomping grounds in Uniondale, then he's not going to get cheered anywhere. So he said he can't fight in New York right now, so this is about as close to home days as it gets. If he got booed here or there, I'd say I'm not there. If he got booed in Newark, that'd be a rough look. That'd be a rough look and very confusing. So it's good that he seems to at least be on the side of the right for once. And yeah, Cejudo, listen, he called himself the king of cringe, which he's kind of like his way of protecting himself from people not liking him. He's developed this persona of like, well, if you don't like me, it's because it's on purpose. It's because I don't want you to like me. This is me winning. You know, you win either way. If he gets cheered, great. Who doesn't want to get cheered? If he gets booed, oh, it means my gimmick is working. You know, so I don't think he cares either way. My thing with this fight is I really wonder. I know we talked about the age a lot, but I just really wonder if Cejudo will be the one to overcome that. We've talked about the statistic that was thrown out there by Luke Thomas, something like welterweight and below championship fights. If you're 36 and over, you're 2-27 or something like that. It's just not. It just has not gone well. Combat sports in general, but especially combat sports, is not generous to athletes, to aging athletes. The higher you go can be mitigated for sure. Obviously, we see heavyweight guys are in their 36, 37, 38, in their 40s that are still contenders. But this is a whole different thing. And you add in that he's been off for so long. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think there's a lot of positives to it, talking about Cejudo, because that's 3 years less wear and tear. Yeah, he's been in the gym, he's been training with people, but that's different than preparing a fight and actually fighting. So that's 3 years less wear and tear. How can that's got to be a good thing? But it's also 3 years away from that kind of proper preparation for a fight and just jumping right back into a title fight against a guy like Aljo, who is, I think underrated as far as how good he is still. It's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask. And we've also talked about motivation. Is Cejudo just coming back for the money? And 2, for the potential to make even more money if he can beat Aljo and get that fight with Alexander Volkanovski? That's a lot of factors to be looking at outside of the fight itself. And if anyone can avoid, getting distracted by that stuff, it's certainly Henry Cejudo. But I think anyone it would affect them if those are factors that are weighing on them heading into such an important fight. So we can break down the tactics and strategies and all that and so the style matchup, but there's a lot going on outside of that. So many intangibles. And I really want to see how Cejudo looks, not competing since May 2020 and having like seemingly been content to walk away from the game. But here he is now.
Jose, I want to go back to something you touched on earlier, because when we have fights like this, the resumes that both of these guys have, like you mentioned, who can legitimize their run better? Like who can be the guy that kind of puts the stamp on what they have done throughout their career? We talk about legacies with fights like this and what a win can do for either guy and the long-term stakes of their career and just the short-term stakes that come with fights like this outside of the title, because you can make a compelling case that both guys really need this one to legitimize their runs in different ways. So I'm curious, in your opinion, Jose, who needs to legitimize themselves more here? Who needs to win this one more? Cejudo, after the long layoff and the things he's been saying, the confidence he and his team have put out there? Or is it Aljamain Sterling, who has had this very strange run that we talked about earlier and doesn't typically get the respect he deserves?
Oh, I think it's for sure Aljamain, because the first time he gets cheered, can't imagine he wants to lose, because then he loses all of that. So Henry Cejudo, as weird and as cringy and as problematic as some of his social media posts have been, in terms of just actual competition, there's not a lot left for him to prove. And, former bantamweight champion, former flyweight champion, and then apparently he was a gold medalist, the youngest U.S. Olympic gold medalist, and he wants to go for 145. So I guess for his own goals, it's a must win. But if Aljamain, as we've all said, not the most beloved champion in the last few years. In fact, I'd probably put him near the bottom in terms of fan perception. He's very, very clearly one of the more underappreciated fighters, especially bantamweights, because if he wins, what's that? Does this tie the record for like most bantamweight title defenses or something like that? So I think it's 100% Aljamain, because we've talked about fighters need, like, if you want to kind of move to the next level in terms of drawing power and just being a high level prize fighter, you need that image of just the arena erupting around you, like Stipe had in Cleveland, Darren Till had it in Liverpool, Conor McGregor had it in Ireland famously. So you need that image, and you need it doesn't even necessarily have to be a strong outing. You just need the win. Like Darren Till, his fight against Wonderboy was very technical, but it was very controversial main event. Stipe melted Alistair Overeem. Conor McGregor melted Diego Brandao. So I think Aljamain just needs a convincing win in front of his home crowd, and just that image alone of beating an Olympic champion, a former 2-division champion in his own backyard, I think would be enough to kind of put Aljamain over the edge in terms of fan popularity. Now, he'll very obviously be booed by a certain demographic if he fights Sean O'Malley, because Sean O'Malley is very popular. When I say demographic, like within an age demographic, like that internet, like YouTube generation that just loves these YouTube boxers. They tune into the Nelk Boys and Barstool and everything. Sean O'Malley has really captured that audience. Aljamain will obviously be booed against Sean O'Malley, but for his career, I think Aljamain Sterling really, really needs this win against Henry Cejudo, especially because he's talked a lot. He's talked just as much as Henry Cejudo. He's saying like, oh, Henry Cejudo I'm going to send him off into retirement and this and that. Like, if Henry Cejudo goes out there and does what he did to Aljamain Sterling, I don't know how much Aljamain Sterling can come back from that.
AK, do you agree or disagree with that?
Again, we've touched upon it a bit before. I'm so concerned that there's no outcome Saturday that is super beneficial to Aljamain Sterling. Winning, duh. Listen, he needs to win. He needs to win. But I'm still trying to struggle to figure out what Jose said is right. If Aljamain Sterling beats Henry Cejudo, a 2-division champion, a former Olympian, a guy who left on his own terms, just really an all-time great combat sports athlete, that should be enough. That should be enough to have people say, okay, you know what? Forget what happened with the one-arm Dillashaw. Forget what happened with the 2 Petr Yan fights. I mean, those are solid wins, but they didn't convince me. But now he beats this guy. I am convinced. Aljo is an all-time great, maybe the second best bantamweight of all time with Dillashaw, in the running to become the best if he can continue this run at 135. But again, maybe I have just become too cynical or too quick to try and like predict, how people are going to react to a fight. I'm just afraid. I'm afraid of the trolls coming out and saying, well, he ran through a guy coming off a 3-year break who was just coming back for poop and giggles, or it went to a close decision. He won a close decision. He couldn't even finish. He won a close decision over a guy who's been away for so long, or worse, some sort of controversy. Can you imagine if there's some sort of foul-related controversy like what happened with the first Petr Yan fight? I dread it. An eye poke, a fence grab, just something that is controversial beyond the result. I am so scared for it. And I don't say this because I'm some huge fan of Aljamain Sterling and I want to see him validated, but I am a huge fan of the bantamweight division. And I feel like it deserves to be above these kind of weird narratives. But until Aljamain Sterling earns, I don't want to say universal because no one in combat sports has universal respect. Until there's some stability at the top, because it's weird for a guy who's again had some title defenses over some huge names. It just doesn't feel like there's been that stability. And I really want to see that. And that starts with him beating Henry Cejudo, and hopefully in such a way that people acknowledge, again, how strong his run really has been. Even before he won the title, he's just been on a really, really strong run in one of the, MMA's marquee divisions, I say. But yeah, I can't help it. I don't know if I'm too snake bitten by people taking things the wrong way and taking a negative slant on things. So I hope I'm wrong. And whoever wins, it's convincing, and we don't have to question this person truly the champion, is truly a great fighter. I just hope we get a result that's leads to nothing but respect and praise, which is often too rare in these discussions.
Oh, dude, there's definitely a real world where if Aljamain Sterling wins this fight, it's gonna be, well, if he fought him 3 years ago, wouldn't have been that way, or
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
only because of the layoff and all this and whatever. But yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree. It's Aljamain Sterling for a number of reasons. One is for the legacy and getting that name on the resume. Who cares about the layoff? All of that, especially like you said, AK. If he does it pure and clean and without any weirdness or controversy, that's huge. And plus, the other thing, if he loses this fight, unless it's an all-out robbery, he ain't getting a rematch. And the UFC is probably not going to do him any favors if he decides to move up to 145. But Cejudo losing, interesting talking point, Jose, because I don't think it hurts his legacy too much. The layoff, what he's done in the past, like you said, not much else more for him to prove overall. 2-division champ, gold medal, etc. But as far as this comeback trail goes, Jose, we talked about this on BTL yesterday. What happens to Henry Cejudo if he does not get his hand raised tomorrow?
I would obviously the betting favorite would be he just retires again, because like what else does like his whole he laid out his list, beat Aljamain Sterling, beat Sean O'Malley, beat Alex Volkanovski, and become 4C or whatever he calls it. So if he loses, that obviously throws a wrench into the game plan. And I don't know if there's another fighter out there that drums up enough interest to keep Henry Cejudo around, unless they just start throwing a lot of money at him. But they didn't do that when he was a 2-division champ that retired. So I can't imagine they do that if he was coming off of a loss. I would imagine he retires. He's not the youngest fighter anymore. The biggest name that he's not going to fight. What you think Henry Cejudo is going to fight Corey Sandhagen in a co-main event of a pay-per-view or a fight night main event? Probably not. Sean O'Malley is the biggest name for him to fight, and to get that fight, he would need to win, because Aljamain Sterling is also saying Sean O'Malley's next. Dana White said Sean O'Malley's next, so obviously you got to win the fight to fight Sean O'Malley and get the big money fight and keep your dreams of being a 3-division champion alive. I would imagine he retires, because I don't think there's not much out there to have him stick around, unless it's one of those weird controversial decisions, or a draw or a foul or something like that. But in this perfect world where it's just the winner is fair and square and it happens to be Aljamain Sterling, I would imagine Henry Cejudo retires again, because he can just go coach at Fight Ready. He's a dad. He can go coach wrestling. He can do all of that.
AK, do you think if he loses, he's done? Or Jed was saying on BTL yesterday, no, he'll just move to 145. He could try to get a Max Holloway fight or something like that and still keep the dream alive somehow. I don't know if I necessarily buy that, but it's an idea, and I wouldn't completely rule it out. But do you think if he loses tomorrow, that's it?
He's not fighting again if he loses. Why would he? Listen, he did the smart thing 3 years ago when he was like, the price isn't right. Happy to be UFC champion, happy to have won titles in 2 divisions, but they weren't paying him enough money. I'm sure he's making a good amount of money for this fight, but it is a title opportunity. Unless he's guaranteed to keep making the same amount of money for this fight, if he decides to continue on, and they're going to keep giving him like championship level money, then fine, he'll stick around. I highly doubt that's the case. He certainly has the name value and the reputation for it, but I don't know how often the UFC does deals like that with people, especially someone coming off of a 3-year layoff with no guarantee again that he wants to stick around for the long run. So unless there's all kind, I would love to know the exact circumstances and negotiations he had with UFC as far as like making some sort of commitment. Like, yeah, definitely, I'm sticking around to fight, win or lose. Maybe I'll move up to 145. Maybe I stick around 135, take some big fights there. But just saying it doesn't sound reasonable. He's only wants to do this fight so he can become champion again, and eventually set up a fight with Volkanovski. He's been very vocal about that. Maybe fight O'Malley, sure. Again, great fight, big money fight, and that's it. But he has to win to get those fights. I would hope so anyway. If he loses and gets a fight with O'Malley, that would just be friggin' insane. I couldn't even imagine why they would do that, but I never thought he'd come back to a title shot in the first place. So Jose said it's a betting favorite, and if I were actually betting, I would put so much money on that, him not fighting again with a loss. It just doesn't make sense for him. he's not. Again, I'm pretty confident he will not make the same amount of money that he's making at UFC 288 for any subsequent non-title fights. He has a family now. Part of his motivation is probably wanting to, see if he can still do it, see if he can still take that time and commit to it. And good for him for making the weight, putting in the training camp. But if it doesn't come with the reward of a title, with the reward of a victory, I can't see him getting motivated to get back in there. He's got other things to do, other fulfilling things in life, and he's only coming back to win. So no, this is it. If he this is it for good if he doesn't win.
Well, speaking of betting, according to our friends at DraftKings Sportsbook, which you could use the code the MA Hour to get an incredible deal and some incredible value, it's close to a pick'em right now. Henry Cejudo -115, the ever so slight favorite. The comeback on the champion Aljamain Sterling -105. Pretty much a coin flip here, José Youngs. Who gets this done tomorrow?
I think most people will probably pick Aljamain, so I'm just going to pick Henry Cejudo, but I say that with zero confidence. This is 50-50 for me because as weird as Henry Cejudo is, he is so good at fighting. He's so good. Like the guy knocked out TJ Dillashaw, the guy knocked out Dominic Cruz, the guy knocked out Marlon Moraes, like 3 of the greatest bantamweights ever. Beat Demetrius Johnson in a split decision, a guy that a lot of people think is the greatest of all time. And even before, do you remember what his fight was before Demetrius Johnson? It was a win over current Bellator champion Sergio Pettis. So the guy, what's that? 3 UFC champions, a 1 champion, a Bellator champion, and a World Series of Fighting champion. Not bad, Henry Cejudo. You're very good at MMA, and you're very good at fighting champions. And I'll pick Henry Cejudo. He less wear and tear on his body. The last few fights, he hasn't even taken that much damage. I learned long ago it's not wise to bet against either Team Longo or Team Fight Ready, so I'm just going to go with the intangibles, and that is Henry Cejudo knows how to win, and sometimes you just got to pick the guy that knows how to win. Aljamain Sterling is supremely talented. These are 2 of the greatest fighters of all time. I made up my mind right now on the spot. I'll just pick Henry Cejudo.
AK, where are you at?
I was leaning towards Aljo when this was even rumored, before, again, when all the talk started. I was leaning towards Aljo when it was officially announced. I'm sticking with Funk Master. I just think, again, youth and size, I think there's just a lot of physical advantages that are going to be hard to overcome. I think, again, we've seen them next to each other a lot during this week. And Aljo already looks a ton bigger. I think it'll be even more pronounced after rehydration, after they're all swolled up and in the cage. You're really going to see how much bigger Aljo was. People were shocked. I think remember when he got in there with TJ, and people were like, "Holy crap!" We knew he was bigger, but he's so much bigger. It's going to be exactly like that with Cejudo. Size isn't everything. I mean, Cejudo, I'm sure, has been out wrestling people larger than him his entire life, right? He's a flyweight, bantamweight guy. I'm sure, and he's in those training rooms. He just matches up with anyone, probably toss him around. So size is it's not everything, but I think it makes a big difference in this fight. Age definitely matters. What I struggle with is trying to figure out exactly how Aljo beats him, because he's not going to out wrestle him. He's not going to just be taking him down and winning in that way. And the striking, I think Aljo is a better striker than people give him credit for, but Henry Cejudo is such an excellent boxer. But I think the reach will sort of mitigate that for Aljo. And like I said, Aljo can be really tricky. He can watch those Piotr Jan fights. There are moments where he is winning exchanges, not the majority of them, but there's moments where he's winning exchanges. I think he's getting better and better in that department. So the striking is he's at a disadvantage, but not huge. And a lot of it will be, can he take Henry's back? I think for most people picking Aljo, that's what they're predicting. He'll kind of maybe bully him against the fence, find a way to take his back, go to work from there, hopefully do some damage from there, get some submission attempts, not make it so murky the second Jan fight. He's got the control, but how much of it is actually effective and scoring? But I do think that is the strategy to beat Henry. So I don't know if it's going to be a pretty win. I don't know if it's going to be a big statement win for Sterling. But I do like him taking a decision. It's an extremely tough fight to call again. Cejudo is so skilled, and Mike, you just said it. We shouldn't even bring this up. If they fought, 3 years ago, and they're both, and Henry was closer to his prime, of course I'd pick Cejudo all the way. But he's not. This isn't 3 years ago. I don't think he's in his prime anymore. I think Aljo still is, maybe at the edge of his prime, but still is. And for me, that's enough for me to go with the champ to be and still.
Yeah, history is just not on the side of Henry Cejudo here, especially with that stat that you laid out, AK. And if we take welterweight out of it, nobody, if we just go lightweight to flyweight, no one over 35 has ever won a title fight in the UFC from lightweight to flyweight. But Henry Cejudo is a different kind of cat. This has been kind of a weird one for me because my initial read on this fight when it was first discussed and went from the press conference to like, okay, this is probably going to happen. My initial read on this fight with the age and the layoff and where Sterling is at and is that Sterling was just going to run him over. Like, I don't know why that my gut was telling me this. I don't know why completely, but since Jump Street, that was sort of my initial read on this fight. I've since softened on that, but I still feel like Aljamain Sterling is going to win. And I will say this. I think if this fight does not go to the cards, if it gets finished, it's going to come from Henry Cejudo. But I just can't go against history too much. And I continue to pick against Aljamain Sterling, and I get proven wrong every single time. I just think Aljamain's physical attributes will be the difference here. And I'm ready to be wrong, and will happily come on the post-fight show and be like, yep, called that one wrong. But going with my gut, I'm going with Aljo, who is just kind of on one right now. And I just think he needs this a lot more than Henry does. It's the biggest opportunity of his career. It's his first ever main event in the UFC. He gets a headline, a pay-per-view, gets to do it at home. I think a lot of those factors are on his side. I think he gets it done in a competitive fight. I think it's one of those fights where he gets off to a nice lead and then Cejudo starts to turn it on late. And I think Aljo hangs on to win a unanimous decision in a gritty, grimy, maybe not the most aesthetically pleasing 5-round main event we've ever seen, but I think it's going to be a super competitive fight, but I think Aljo hangs on and gets it done. Co-main event.
Mike, our voters are...
go ahead.
Oh, Mike, our YouTube poll, right down the middle, 50% Aljo, 50% Cejudo, right down the middle.
It's so tough to call. So tough to call. That's the second 5-round fight that we will get because the co-main event is also 5 rounds. And I had mixed feelings about this fight. And if you listen to Heck of a Morning the last couple of days, you know why, but I'll get into it a little bit more later. But the stakes seem to be very high here between Gilbert Burns and Belal Muhammad. This fight came together very quickly after Charles Oliveira's injury forced his fight with Beneil Dariush to get pushed back to June 10th at UFC 289. And on less than 3 weeks' notice, we found out that Belal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns are going to have this 5-round fight. And I give both guys a ton of credit for this. And I hope the UFC is giving these guys each a big, giant bag of money for doing this. But this fight is happening. And according to both guys, and even Dana White at the press conference yesterday, the winner of this fight will go on to fight for the UFC welterweight title in their next fight. Whether that is true or not remains to be seen. But Jose, your thoughts on this co-main event matchup on less than 3 weeks' notice between Gilbert Burns and Belal Muhammad?
I mean, I like the fight as a fight, but like obviously, realistically, Belal Muhammad should have already gotten the title shot, and I'm never not going to watch Gilbert Burns fight. So I like this fight as a high-level martial arts fight, and I am ecstatic that it's a 5-round fight because I think number one contender fights should all be 5-round fights. That being said, I think, like, if you're going to ask me who has the most to win or most to lose in this fight, the answer is very clearly Belal Muhammad. It's more obvious than when you asked me about the main event, and I chose Aljamain Sterling because Belal Muhammad has talked a lot. He's done a lot of guest fighter media scrums. He's talked a lot on Twitter. He's at press conferences saying, "Oh, no wonder the Nets left New Jersey for Brooklyn and this and that." He is not liked by the fans, unfortunately. And as he said, if I win this fight and you're still a hater, you're just always going to be a hater. It doesn't help that he's fighting one of the more fan-friendly in terms of action in Gilbert Burns. The man, this is his 3rd fight of 2023, and if he wasn't going to wait for the title, if he wins this fight, I can very easily see a world where Gilbert Burns fights 5-6 times in 2023. That man always wants to fight, and he's always in very exciting fights. And obviously, the Hamzat fight is one of the best fights you'll ever see, ever. And then Neil Magny, he just kind of tore through, and then he retired Jorge Masvidal. Belal Muhammad beats Gilbert Burns, it will be the biggest win of his career. He'll get his number one contender. He'll do something that Hamzat's done and Kamaru Usman has done. at welterweight. Unless I'm forgetting someone, those are the only two guys to beat Gilbert Burns at welterweight. Belal Muhammad has lost to Leon Edwards after getting stabbed in the eye. Outside of that, he's beaten everyone put in front of him. And I feel like he's one of those guys that it kind of reminds me of when the UFC would match make Jan Blachowicz, where they would give him these guys where, oh, if you beat Jan, you'll get a title shot, like Sean Brady, Vicente Luque, Stephen Thompson, like all these guys. They just really want them to, the UFC wants them to beat Belal and then go on to a title shot. And Belal just kind of grinds them into the canvas and picks up a win. And then they're like, oh, what can Belal do to get more fans? Why don't you go fight undefeated Sean Brady in Abu Dhabi, fight backwards in the rankings, and maybe if you knock him out, we'll cheer for you. He does all of those things, and they still boo him. So he's leaned into it. Belal Muhammad has everything to win, everything to lose. But I hope these guys are getting a big fat paycheck because they deserve it for taking this. Like, what was Belal Muhammad? Said he was like 190 something when he took this fight and he lost all that weight, made weight, looked fairly easy, did the discount double check sign up on the scale. Yeah, I'm very excited for this fight, though.
AK, your thoughts on this co-main event?
Again, I wish it was under more ideal circumstances for both guys, but let's just be happy it's happening. It's a great matchup. It's a great matchup. Forget number one contender talk. We can question, Dana White's sincerity all we want. At least it's good he said it. This is such a weird thing to be a way to frame it in a positive sense. At least he said it. That's more than he does for a lot of fights that fans are kind of like, oh, this should be a contender fight. Like, is this for, what are the stakes of this fight? At least he said it. At least he has put out the possibility that he and the UFC matchmakers and whoever else makes these decisions are viewing Belal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns, whoever wins, as the rightful number one contender to the winner of the eventual Edwards-Colby Covington matchup. Also, should something happen to one of those guys, they will step in for either a title opportunity or an interim title opportunity. So that's a good thing. That is the best way to look at this fight, beyond the fact that it'll just be enjoyable to watch. And I'm glad they gave it 5 rounds. That tells me they are taking it seriously as far as seeing if these guys are contenders. We often say that all fights that are, the UFC unofficially designates as number one contender fights should be 5 rounds, right? Because doesn't that make sense? You want to see if someone can go the full 5, can go the distance. So they've handled it really well. And the fighters, Gilbert Burns and Belal Muhammad, so much credit in the world for stepping up for this opportunity that only manifested because Charles Oliveira and Benny Dariush, fell out. So it wasn't the number one choice for the UFC. I really want to believe that if either guy has a, puts on an impressive performance, and I think they'll have to, by the way, to win this fight. I would be shocked if we got a dull fight here. I love the matchup. I love the matchup stylistically. I really want to believe that whoever gets this fight fights for some form of title, whether interim or the undisputed title shot at Edwards or Covington by the end of the year. That's probably overly optimistic. We don't even know when Edwards and Covington are going to fight. We just know that it's going to happen. But yeah, I like the matchup. And I will say, I agree. I think I've seen some people mention it, that I don't think a loss destroys either guy's long-term prospects. It sucks. It sucks for Belal because, again, he's on this win streak, undefeated streak. People can view the Edwards no contest however they want. It sucks for Belal because he put in all this work, and it'd be so easy for the UFC and for people who aren't fans of him to dismiss him with a loss. And it's like, okay, well, that streak's over. We don't need to talk about Belal as a title contender anymore. But I think that'd be silly. I think it would discount a lot of the good work he's done. Some of the names he's beaten. So it'll sting really bad for Belal at first, but I don't think a loss ruins his chances. And Gilbert, he's already had a chance. He's already fought for the title, so it would sting a little bit less if he kind of got pushed aside for now. And frankly, if Gilbert never fought for the title again, at least he can say he got a crack at it and gave Usman a pretty good 10 minutes, however long that fight lasted. So Belal kind of needs this. And Mike, I'll tell you right now, I'm leaning towards Belal.
All right, we'll get into the picks in a minute, but I agree with both of you guys because I get the UFC wanted to put a co-main event together with some stakes to replace one that had big stakes, but just this division and how it looks right now, and Leon's out till at least the fall, the Colby fight, there's just no rush in doing this. They could have waited, and honestly, if they did the Jan Blachowicz Paulo Costa fight, I would have been totally fine with that. The build would have been fun. Both guys are super interesting. Costa brings a lot of attention to all of these fights that he's a part of, and it doesn't disrupt a damn thing. And now we have two guys fighting on short notice, may not fight again until 2024 with how things are shaping up. And by the way, I know it hasn't been booked yet, but Conor McGregor is supposedly going to fight Michael Chandler at 170 pounds at some point this year. And if he goes out there and beats Chandler, that's going to cause a wrinkle in this plan too. You don't think Conor has a good chance of jumping either of these guys, especially if Belal wins? So the fight is great. This is 1000% the fight that should have been made. The Belal Shafkat fight, sure, but it didn't make a ton of sense. These two guys should have been fighting all along, but we could have done this in July or August, and we could have done it on the same card as the title fight. Like, that's my only quibble with it, because the fight is interesting. Obviously, the short notice nature makes it a little more intriguing, and the winner gets a lot. We don't know what's going to happen to the loser. They're probably going to have to fight Shavkat Rakhmonov, especially if Belal loses this. So we'll see how far push them back in the title picture. But it just seems like a lot to put on the line on such short notice when it wasn't really a do or die type of situation here. But nonetheless, currently Gilbert Burns, the slight favorite, -125. The comeback on Belal Muhammad, -105. Jose, AK is leaning towards Belal Muhammad. Are you doing the same?
No, I'm going to leave towards Gilbert Burns. That man, like I said, he's only, I think the world of Belal Muhammad in terms of what he can bring to the table in the octagon. I just think Gilbert Burns gets it done. He's been incredibly active. He's not a guy that gets really out of shape between fights. He's been in fight camp. So he was already in fight shape when I assume when they offered him this fight. Belal, kind of waffled a bit on taking the fight, it seems like, on social media, but then ended up accepting it when he decided he actually could make weight. I'm curious what his situation was in terms of being fight ready, because like Dustin Poirier said, like, I could have taken this fight. I just wasn't in fight shape. There's a difference in getting in shape and getting in fight shape. Gilbert Burns seems like a guy that's always in fight shape. I just think he has more paths to victory. He can knock you out. He can submit you. He can take you to a decision, especially in a 5-round fight where he has more time to play. I just think Gilbert Burns gets it done. He's one of the more exciting fighters on this roster. I put him right up there with guys like Justin Gaethje and Yuri Prohaska for pound most exciting fighters and most violent fighters in any weight class. I lean towards Gilbert Burns against a lot of people at 170, maybe even a lot of those guys above him in the rankings, which are very few. So yeah, I pick Gilbert Burns. Don't know how, but I envision him getting his hand raised at the end.
AK, you said you're leaning Belal Muhammad. Explain yourself.
Yeah, listen, I've had Gilbert as my number 2 guy at 170 for a long time. I love Gilbert Burns. Great fight, just super well-rounded guy, great finisher, incredible jiu-jitsu. But I think I've overlooked Belal a bit as well. And I also think Belal is just getting better and better and better and better. Listen, there was a lot of criticism early on for some of his decision wins. Yeah, and listen, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you, I can remember how his win over Lyman Good went. I don't remember that fight. Maybe it wasn't exciting. I don't recall. But I do remember the Damian Maia fight, his more recent encounters, and it's not just because of recency bias, because he's gotten better. He's gotten better at really controlling these fights. He's not just a point fighting. I don't feel he is anyway. Like, he's doing damage to some of these guys. The Sean Brady fight, he was huge. Just getting a finish was huge, but that to me was like the culmination of a lot of performance, improvements he's made. There's no shame in not being able to finish Vicente Luque. There's no shame in not being able to finish Stephen Thompson, Damian Maia. These guys are super tough, and Sean Brady is also super tough. So finishing him was so badly needed for his reputation, and I'm just impressed. I think he's trending so well. I love that it's 5 rounds. I think 5 rounds favors him. I think if he stays out of danger through the first 2, I think if he can push the pace in the last 3 rounds, boy, I do think Gilbert Burns is going to have a little bit of trouble dealing with that. Like I said, I'm really excited about this fight. I love the matchup, and I think it's going to be a potential fight of the night candidate. And I have Belal just outlasting him. But Gilbert Burns is great. I just think this is Belal Muhammad's time. He's going to make that statement, and he's going to earn himself some kind of title shot. And I think that's an exciting thing to think about.
Yeah, this is one of those fights where initially my gut told me, yeah, this guy's definitely going to win. And that guy was Gilbert Burns. But then I went back and watched a lot of tape. And the more I've watched and the more I've seen from both guys in their current runs, Gilbert Burns being 36, almost 37, Belal still a couple years younger. I just see Belal like just on another level right now. Like he's just, it's just his time. And the big thing for me, and I was doing the watch party obviously when the fight was going on. So I didn't really I obviously watched the fight, but I didn't get to like sit down and really break it down. This might be a little hot takey. I did not love what I saw from Gilbert Burns when I rewatched the Jorge Masvidal fight earlier this week. Burns won. It wasn't controversial. He looked good, but he didn't look great. Matchup that, especially with the way Masvidal looked and how he sort of admitted he felt heading into that fight, I thought Burns could have been a little better there, but I just didn't think he looked great. So I'm with you, AK. I'm actually leaning Belal Muhammad to win a decision here. I think it's a really good matchup for him. And much like the main event, if a finish comes, I think it comes from Burns in the first 7.5 minutes of the fight. But if that doesn't happen, I think Muhammad and his pace, dude doesn't get out of shape, Ramadan, short notice, none of that stuff. I don't think it's going to play a huge factor in this fight, but I do think Muhammad can pull away and steal a massive win. So I think it is going to be a close fight. I do think if a finish comes, it comes from the Burns side, but I am leaning Belal Muhammad to outlast Gilbert Burns and pick up the biggest win of his career. So that's the main and the co-main event. We got Jessica Andrade Jonan on the main card, Movsar Evloev versus newcomer Diego Lopez, the return of Chrome Gracie versus Charles Jourdain. That will kick off the main card. So let's go to low-key banger. Jose, I mean, there's a lot to choose from here. You mentioned some of the names that aren't getting enough attention. I think Drew Dober, Matt Frevola is probably the most obvious pick, but that's the main event prelim fight. So what's the low-key fight storyline that's not on the main card, that's not getting talked about enough, in your opinion?
I mean, in terms of like rankings wise and what it means to the division, the most important fight of the prelims is obviously Marina Rodriguez and Ferdinand Jandiroba. Marina Rodriguez, I feel like, has been on the cusp of a title shot on more than one occasion. She had that split decision loss to Carla Esparza. She had that draw against Cynthia Calvillo. She lost to Amanda Lemos in a finish that I don't think people remember, but it was at the time there was a lot of debate of whether they should have stopped the fight. But as you do in MMA, people are quick to forget. She's one of those rare fighters that has multiple draws on her resume. And she at one point, I felt like she was in the same boat and Beneil and Sergey Pavlovich and all these guys are like, she had earned a title shot. I feel like she beat Mackenzie Dern, she beat Michelle Waterson, she beat Yan Xiaonan, and then I don't think she needed to take that fight against Amanda Lemos. She did. She lost. She likes to fight. She moved on, and she's taking this fight against Verna Jandiroba, who I can't believe these two haven't been matched up before. Like it's rare when you get two strawweights that have 15 plus wins and single digit losses on their resumes fighting for the first time, and this is what we have. It's every definition of the word, a striker versus submission specialist. Maria Rodriguez obviously has incredibly unorthodox looping punches, and Verna Jandiroba, I only think she has 2-3 wins by decision and maybe 4, and I know she only has 1 TKO, and outside of that, it's been all submissions. So yeah, I love this fight for what it does for the division. One of these fighters will, continue on their path to get a title shot. Verna, I believe her last win was over Angela Hill, but that was a year ago, I think, if I remember correctly. And then before that, she had just lost to Amanda Hebos and Mackenzie Dern, and I think Carla Esparza. And then Marina Rodriguez has only lost to Carla, the former champion, and Amanda Lemos, who a lot of people think could be the next challenger at 115 pounds. So in terms of importance, this is the answer. In terms of excitement, the obvious answer is, of course, Drew Dober versus Matt Frevola, because someone's going to sleep in that fight. But that's too obvious of an answer, and I think Marina and Verna deserve a little more spotlight than they're getting leading into this pay-per-view.
Good choice. AK, low-key banger storyline, fighter, etc.
My best friend, I got a poll going. What fight are you looking forward to the most outside of the top three? So I didn't want to. I was trying to narrow down. This is actually, again, like a lot of sort of low key bangers. So I wanted to narrow it down as much as I could. So I had to remove Andrade Yan Xiaonan. So I put right now leading, of course, Dober Frevola, 57%. Gracie Jourdain not far behind, 32%. I think there's a lot of people are curious as to how Krone's going to look on his way back, because he looked spectacular against Alex Caceres. He has the Gracie Mystique, and then got a bit of a reality check with Cub Swanson, and Charles Jourdain feels like somewhere in between there. So, and then Rodriguez and Jandiroba, 6% only. Shame on you people, and really shame on you people for my fourth choice for the poll and my pick for the low key banger, Mike. I think you know what it is.
You're doing it, aren't you?
Versus Braxton
Let's
Smith.
go.
Of course, I'm going Parker Porter versus Braxton Smith. This is a beautiful heavyweight contest. Parker Porter's Parker Porter. Again, he is the most Parker Porter person on the planet. There are probably other Parker Porters out there somewhere. Yeah, exactly. And none of them are as, I'm not going to say it again because I don't want to hear the sound right now, as Parker Porter as him. Oh, I said it. Braxton Smith is a 5'11" heavyweight, the beautiful monster. I want to give a quick recap of his story. I talked about this in the weigh-in show, but I just give a quick recap. Shout outs to Daniel Vreeland and Top Turtle MMA, who did an interview with him this week. That's how I learned about Braxton Smith. Aside from looking at his record, of course, 5 straight first round knockouts. Shout out to them. You can find that on, I think, cagesidepress.com. Listen to that show. Braxton Smith debuts in 2014, loses to Chase Sherman, and then disappears for 8 years. He was asked why this was the case. He said MMA wasn't even his choice in the first place. His mother, he was an athlete in high school and college, I think. And then his mother said, I guess it didn't work out. And his mother just wanted him to go still do something with his athletic gifts. And she told him go. She was watching WEC, not UFC. She was watching WEC. And she's like, you should do this. And he's like, all right, I'll try it. He gets knocked up by Chase Sherman. He's like, nope, I tried it. I'm good. Unfortunately, his mother did pass away. And I think, that sort of motivated him to give it one more shot. So he returns to competition last year, 2022, just rattles off a bunch of first round knockouts, gives himself this deadline to make it to the UFC. If he doesn't within 2 years, he's just going to, again, go back to doing whatever. No more MMA. Here he is in the UFC fighting Parker Porter. So very interesting guy. Very interesting guy. Great nickname. Complete wild card. Again, he's got 5 first round knockouts, but 2 of them are against the same guy. He's got one of those kind of records. Parker Porter, I think, is a considerable step up. So this is either the aforementioned is either going to dominate this fight against the relatively inexperienced Braxton Smith, or Braxton Smith KOs him inside of a round, and we have ourselves a new star in the UFC heavyweight division. I'm super excited.
They should bump that fight to the main card, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I'm there's a couple of ones we didn't mention. I'm curious about Chaos Williams. We haven't seen him in about a year. I think he's got a really good tailor-made sort of stylistic matchup. Rolando Bedoya has a great record, good fighter, but he gets hit a lot, and Chaos Williams hits really, really hard. So I'm excited to see Chaos back in there. Is a very popular Otno selection, AK, and people are wondering where he's been. Well, he's going to be in the octagon tomorrow. Ikram Aliskerov making his debut. Tough matchup with Phil Haas, but I think he's going to be a real threat at 185 pounds. And I feel like this could be a breakout night for Kennedy Nzechukwu. I know he had the weird main event with Iwan Kutalaba and all of that, but I feel like fighting a guy like Devin Clark, it'll be on ESPN. It'll be on that prelim set. I feel like Kennedy's a guy who his physical gifts are sort of, they've always been there. And I think his fighting prowess is catching up to those physical gifts. One of the things John Anik was telling me when we spoke was that he went out to Fortis MMA and got to watch a lot of those guys and gals train. And he said Kennedy Nzechukwu is the hardest worker in the room. Was really impressed by him being such a sponge and how physical he is and just being able to absorb all this information, and just really stood out to John during their trip over there. So definitely interested to see what he can do against a wily veteran in Devin Clark, but should be a fun card, and we'll see it all go down tomorrow. We'll take a few questions from the peeps. We'll bring in Casey. Casey, is today your anniversary? Did I see that? You and the
yes,
iconic
sir.
voice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, happy
voice.
anniversary.
4 years. 18 years together, 4 years
What?
official.
Wow.
18 years, yeah. 4 years official, though.
18
Yeah.
years.
I know. It's weird. It's really weird. All right, but enough about me. What do we got here? All right. Oops. Blow that up.
Matt Maggio. So what's everyone's thoughts on Luminary saying Aljo is the greatest bantamweight of all time with a win? I don't know if I'm taking crazy pills.
Which Luminaries?
I think it's clearly Dominic Cruz. So John Anik did mention, like, I don't know what Luminaries are saying this, but John Anik said that Aljo has a strong case. He thinks it's Dominic Cruz right now. And even if Aljo wins this fight, it might not be enough, but he goes out and beats Henry Cejudo, maybe even finishes him, and then goes out and just runs over Sean O'Malley. And I think that might be enough to get him past Dominic Cruz. So I don't think he does so with the win. Maybe if he beats Cejudo, or maybe if he beats Cejudo then O'Malley, maybe that's something else. But how close is he, Jose, right now?
I mean, he's close. The fact that we're having this conversation just kind of cements the fact that he's close. It's just similar to like, oh, if Charles Oliveira had beaten Islam, is he the greatest lightweight ever? Could be. Very close. Maybe one more big win, but this just feels like bantamweight has the bantamweight title's kind of been a hot potato, kind of like heavyweight. So it's just the fact that he's in the conversation. Maybe the win over Sean O'Malley, because then I think he's missing Dominic Cruz on his right. Like if he had a win over Dominic Cruz and he had a win over TJ Dillashaw and he had a win over Henry Cejudo, then he would probably be the best. But he's right up there, top 5 for sure.
AK, how close is he?
It's just hard for me to compare some of the champions now to that mid 2000s guys like GSP, Anderson Silva, Dominic Cruz from WC to UFC, Jose Aldo, because that longevity to me was so important. We can extrapolate a lot from wins over, again, let's say beat Cejudo, Petr Yan, TJ Dillashaw, huge. You could say, well, it doesn't matter that he doesn't have the a more of a breadth of opponents. Like those 3 guys are so much better than all these other guys. By beating those 3 by proxy, he's kind of we kind of know he's better than these divisions, but other guys in the division. But like longevity matters because MMA is so random. For me, it's that ability to so frequently fight. Not that Sterling's been inactive. Outside of after he won the title and was dealing with injuries. But it's so important to me to show that longevity, to have these different like peaks. Because if you look at Dominic Cruz, I've just had to go to his resume now. There's some awesome names in here. This is dating back to 2009. Ian McCall is a great fighter. Joseph Benavidez twice, huge wins. Uriah Faber twice. DJ, he beat DJ. People like to sort of scoff at that because, DJ was competing bantamweight. Like that win to me totally counts.
DJ was
I love that fight
DJ
because
was a top 10 bantamweight. People forget that. Yeah,
he absolutely was top 10 bantamweight. Yeah. Hey, he's a top 10 bantamweight now, technically, if we're talking about the one weight classes. That's a great win. That's such a forgotten win. He had to mix the martial arts to do it. It was a very cool fight. I don't know how people just didn't watch that fight. It was such a cool win. He beats Dillashaw, controversial Dillashaw. The resume is so strong for Dominic Cruz. And again, if you took like the 3 best names of Sterling and the 3 best names of Cruz, sure, it's comparable. But what puts Cruz over is that second tier of guys he's also beaten. And I want to see more of that from Aljo, but these guys just don't do these long title reigns anymore. It's just not a thing anymore, and that's fine. So it's just different eras. If you want to make an argument for Aljo, if he beats Cejudo, beats O'Malley, beats maybe a Cheeto Vera, beats someone else, I'll hear it, but it's just really hard to compare eras. So there's a case that he could surpass Dominic Cruz. For me, Cruz still pretty clearly number 1.
Aljo will tie for the most title defenses in bantamweight history if he wins this fight with 3, and he will be the first fighter in UFC history, first bantamweight fighter in UFC history, first bantamweight champion in UFC history to defend his title 3 consecutive times. No one has ever done it before. Dillashaw and Cruz have done it 3 times, but over separate reigns. So that's history right there. And if Sterling beats O'Malley, he'll be number 1.
Who's your top 5 then? Because we keep talking about number 1. Who's 2 through 5?
So Aljo. So I guess you gotta go Aljo. You gotta go Dillashaw. You gotta go Dominic Cruz. If you want to throw in, and then see, this is where you get like you could say like, would you put Cejudo in there? It's not. Like, would you like? I don't. Would you put Cejudo in there?
I would throw Miguel Torres in there for sure because at one point it's like
That's a good one.
Renan Barao. I know his career kind of ended strangely, but at one point he was
He should
number
be in there.
2. Cody Garbrandt obviously has to be up. Uriah Faber's like the
TJ?
best.
Faber was a great
Yeah,
bantamweight.
TJ,
he just
TJ,
never.
TJ,
Did
obviously.
we mention TJ? Yeah, I forgot. Sorry.
Yeah, we
we
mentioned
talked
TJ.
about
Oh,
a
sorry.
lot
Sorry.
of people.
Okay.
Yeah,
Like
TJ
Eduardo
Sterling
Dantas
Cruz
for a
is
while
your.
was good.
Yeah.
Bibiano was great, obviously,
Mhm.
for like a decade. So at that point, it gets murky.
Yeah.
I think bantamweight because I feel it is the best division, not the marquee division. I get that because it doesn't sell the most tickets, but I think just how deep it is, it's gonna be so hard to ever get like a Habib type of like that guy clearly is the best ever, and at the bantamweight division because it's just so freaking competitive. But yeah, I would agree. Dom is the GOAT right now at bantamweight. But
It's like BJ Penn was at lightweight for years. He was just kind of the default answer.
Yeah. But
Umar's coming.
Umar's
Umar
coming.
is coming.
I feel we're going to see
Marab's waiting around too.
Marab's
waiting around
there. I think there's a guy in Bellator who's their champ,
And
who's the interim champ that's super good too.
The Marab one is strange because a lot of people on this website even don't consider Amanda the best women's fighter ever because she has losses early in her career. Marab started 0-2 in the UFC, and people want to add him into the possibility of greatest bantamweights ever. Like RDA started 0-2, and he's very clearly one of the greatest lightweights ever. So people move the goalposts to fit people in these narratives.
Yeah, there's almost a difference between like careers and like incredible runs, and I think unfortunately, Marab starts. He was 0-2. I thought he was 0-1. Why he started 0-2? Who was the second loss against? I know Ricky's.
Ricky Simone and Frankie Saenz. He lost to Frankie Saenz in his first fight. Split.
I thought he won that fight.
But either way, the fact that it was even competitive.
Technically, his pro career he started 1-2. He lost to Ricky Bandejas and then went on a run and beat Rufion Stotts and then got to the UFC and lost to Frankie. Like it happens.
Yeah, this is wild. Bantamweight is just really hard to. There's no, I don't know. Yeah, it's all over the place. And then guys, they continue their career too long, so kind of you have the Renan Barão kind of situation where he was on that Mount Rushmore, but now we're like, you don't even kind of talk about him anymore.
Oh wow! You just said it. I didn't even think of him. I didn't even think
Who?
of him. Like Barão.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
I totally. Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Like we don't even remember how dominant he was because of how bad he kind of ended his career.
There was a point in time where we were talking about is Johnny Hendricks a top 5 welterweight? Like it's MMA. It's silly. At one point we were like Usman and Woodley could have been the greatest welterweights.
I never bought into that narrative.
All right. Oh, no. I had the question. Where'd it go?
We'll take a couple more.
A couple more.
Is Kron Gracie a viable title contender now or ever?
No.
I mean, it's kind of hard to answer that question. Dude hasn't fought in 4 years. I guess we'll see.
Not based off his last performance. So unless he's evolved a lot, then probably not.
Mike Braxton Smith. He had to just take a time off.
I'm ashamed to say I used the when you gave me the heck of a morning rains while you're on vacation. I used some of that time to crap talk the Gracies. I'm not proud of it. Someone asked, not a question like this, just like if Kron Gracie loses, like what do you think will happen to him? And I said, just being honest, the history of the Gracies in MMA post whatever Hickson, it's pretty fleeting. It's like once they lose, because again, remember, these guys have options outside of MMA. They probably make more money doing straight up jiu-jitsu related things. They do MMA for the challenge, a decent paycheck, once they get to the UFC or whichever one championship, Bellator, whatever, you're still making good money. I mean, it's just a good different thing to do. It's, you're expanding your portfolio, as it were, your combat sports portfolio. But once things like don't go their way, they tend to just like disappear. I remember Hollis Gracie fought once in the UFC. He lost to like Joey Beltran and then he did fight in MMA again, but he was one and done in the UFC and got out of there. I want to say Hodger Gracie, I guess you could consider him a success. He went out with a win. He went out with like a one championship title win, but it just never felt like he was.
That was a money thing. Yeah, they just
Right. It never felt like he was there to stay. Crone, I don't know. This is only his third UFC fight, guys. His third UFC fight, like his 9th MMA fight. So yeah, listen, it'd be cool. His 7th MMA fight, excuse me. So yeah, it's cool to imagine one of these Gracies finally carrying on that legacy and winning a UFC title, for the first time since like UFC 6 or whatever. But I'm not convinced. Kron Gracie, prove me wrong, sir. Prove me wrong. Dominate Charles Jourdain, my countryman Charles Jourdain, on Saturday and go on a run. But if I had to guess, this man will never fight for a UFC title.
that is he gonna be? How about is he a top? Would he ever be a top 10?
No,
UFC title is asking a lot, but
no.
top 10. If
It's
he
featherweight,
loses,
man, featherweight's tough.
It's a hard division, man.
It's a hard
It's
division.
a very
man.
hard division.
It's
a lot of work to do.
Let me pull up this featherweight rank.
well, you know what?
All right, go for it, Jose.
If Kron, if he rolls through Jourdain, I mean, it'll be fun to talk about. I think he's an interesting conversation to talk about. Like there's a lot of mystery. If he loses tomorrow night, yeah, I think we're all gonna be like, yeah, he's kind of done in MMA if he loses tomorrow night.
I think he'll be like he's done with MMA.
Yeah,
I honestly just be like, yeah, I'm good. I tried it. I tried it. I got a win. I got to fight a legend, Cub Swanson. I'm good. Like I'm okay.
Last thing.
What did you guys think about Belal turning heel at the press conference? I loved it. If he was always this vocal. Listen, everybody. Belal has always been like this. The problem is when the lights are bright and he has a moment where he can make a difference, he doesn't do it. He doesn't do the thing. He always misses when the mic is in front of him. Always. And that is mostly why he is in the position he is in right now. I go back to the tweet after he beat Vicente Luque, and I said, do not call out Kamaru Usman or Colby Covington. Call out Khamzat Chimaev right now. This is fresh off of the Gilbert Burns fight. Call this man out with a live microphone. And what does he do? He calls out Colby in a fight he had zero chance of getting. And we're just like, oh, why do you keep doing this? And Aljo's the same way. He should have just picked up the Sean O'Malley bag and ran with it, and he didn't do it. And now he's got to fight Henry Cejudo instead of fighting Sean O'Malley. That's the problem with Belal. I think he's getting better and more opportunistic now since the win over Sean Brady. He almost didn't call out Chimaev after he beat Sean Brady. He had a course correct, still didn't say Chimaev's name, but we knew at least the direction he was going. The whole thing with Colby and the interview I did with him and Colby shouting out and sort of threatening John Anik and all that, Belal picked up that ball and he ran with it. He did interviews with everybody, clipped off. Belal was getting over a little bit. People were like, oh, I would like to see him fight Colby now. So kind of in a better spot. I actually liked the heel turn yesterday. I thought it was pretty good. I thought some of the lines about the Jersey people were hilarious. Now I see why the Nets left here to go to Brooklyn's because you all suck. Like, I thought it was hilarious.
Nah, it's just boring.
Hilarious. You think
Cheap
it's boring?
Cheap pop.
I like
He's
a good
trying.
cheap pop. Yeah,
But
I
he's
like it.
trying.
I'm okay with that.
Cheap pops work in this sport. But Mike, you really put that much weight into the 30 seconds they get in the mic afterward.
Yeah,
rather than
I do.
I just think that's really, and I'm not saying you're wrong or anything. Or I'm not even disagreeing. I just think it's such a. I guess I'm still in denial about the Conor McGregor era where like it doesn't even matter what you do in the actual fight. It just matters what you say on that mic afterward.
Conor McGregor era, Chael Sonnen got that going.
but you know what I'm saying. That kind of like it doesn't like actually Chael Sonnen is kind of a great example. Boring wrestler. I know he's had exciting fights, but boring wrestler. But what made him famous was what he said on the mic. And
Chael Sonnen is a top 5 prize fighter in MMA.
Oh, yeah,
probably
100%.
In terms of skill to prize fighting, there is not a bigger gap than Chael Sonnen.
Kimbo's
Kimbo's, yeah, it's good.
Kimbo. That's
Ben Askren, but like, Like I went back, like speaking, like now we're gonna go on a child tangent. Like I looked at his like resume from like the first Anderson Silva fight to present. Literally only fights former champions. Like you'd have to go back to his, I think, Dan Miller fight to find the last non-former UFC, Strikeforce, WC, Bellator champion on his resume. That dude talks himself into, like, he had 2 careers before and after fighting Yushin Okami.
I'm not even saying that you have to be like Chael and call people out when you have the mic in front of you. Like Beneil Dariush is another great example of this. Goes out and beats Mateusz Gamrot in a fight he probably shouldn't even had to have taken, right? Should have put him in prime position to go fight the winner of Islam Makhachev and Charles Oliveira. I know Volkanovski was in the crowd, but what does Beneil Dariush do? And I'm not saying Beneil Dariush should be like, hey, Islam, MFer, you stole everything I work for. I'm going to fight your ass. No, just be like, hey, Khabib is always a man of his word, Islam. You said before this fight, if I beat this guy, you're going to fight me for the title next. So if you win the belt, I'm ready. Like, just do that. But what did Beneil Dariush do? First, he kind of recited a weird promo at the beginning. And then he said, I don't care. I'll fight 10 more guys before I fight for the title. I'm just like, what are you doing, dude?
That was the worst thing to ever say. I'll give you that one.
That was bad, man.
I'll give you that one.
You don't have to sit there and like you don't have to be Connor or Nate but just be like, hey, Hamzat, that fight with Gilbert Burns was awesome, dude. Like, let's go. And it's another thing with Belal too, is like he would miss the call out, but then when he would do all the interviews he would do afterwards, then he would call out Hamzat. But he didn't do it when it mattered. And that was the thing. And that's kind of why he ended up fighting Sean Brady. And I knew that was going to happen because on to the next one, I'm like, he's going to fight Sean Brady next. Guaranteed he's not going to get any of those fights. Not going to get Colby. He's not going to use because the UFC takes those clips and uses them for promotional material. So what are you going to do with Beneil Dariush? Hey, here's how this fight came to be. Oh, I'll fight 10 more people. You can't use that in promotional material. You just got to, that stuff matters. It's not everything. You still have to win fights, but when you're in positions where it's very close and there's multiple contenders, you have to find a way to separate yourself and solidify yourself as that top contender. And you got to do it on the mic. You have to do all things. Like, we can't be all things, but if you could do a little something on the mic and fight your ass off, that's a very good thing. And I think Belal is starting to realize that. And we'll see. If he beats Gilbert Burns, like, it is what it is. But he shouldn't even have to take this fight. Shouldn't have had to fight Sean Brady. But that's how you inch it. And one thing Chael Sonnen gave to the sport is this is the best advice ever. The next fight starts when the last fight ends. You have to already like have a name in mind. You have to be ready to plant the seeds.
If you are a high-level prize fighter, that is 100% true. Yeah. If you are,
I personally, and I'm not saying anyone is wrong because you're all very right. I like Beneil Dariush's approach to it. I really do. Like when he did media day, people were like, why'd you take this fight? He's like, I just really like fist fighting and I like money. And that's what I get paid to do. I'm like, fair play, sir. So I don't.
I get that.
I like, and then Callan Chukagian was like, I didn't know I could say no to fights, so I just take fights. I was like, I love it.
I get that. I get that part of it.
Right, because Max Holloway did not do a lot of talking. He just kept murking fools, and then he got a title shot and he got popular. So I personally like that. Don't talk yourself into the money fight. Just become the money fight by winning. But that's me. But I get it. I get this stance.
Yeah. And what did Max Holloway do after the Calvin Kattar win? What did he do? He said, I don't even care about the Volkanovski fight. I'll fight Khabib. I'll fight him. I just want the biggest challenge. And even after this last win, already had it in mind.
That fight was set up.
I'll fight Khabib. If Khabib comes back, I should be in the mix for that fight. Not any of these other guys. I should be that guy. Like, you just got to do something. Put yourself out there. Get a headline. That's it. You don't have to be fancy about it.
This used to be Aljo's situation. Remember, he was the guy that never got the shot. You know, he just, yeah. What a wild world.
It's an important part of the game. It's weird. And now they have the producers ask these guys. They ask them, and even in like the backstage interviews, like, "Oh, what do you want next?" I don't care. And then they'll poke and prod and be like, "Nobody on the roster. There's not one name on the roster that you want to fight." And then they're like, "Well, you know what? I kind of want to fight this guy." Like, that's the thing. They want you to do that. They're telling you. They're asking you, "Who do you want to fight next?" Call somebody out. That's what they do. That's what the sport is kind of at right now. It's sports
They can
and
tell him to
entertainment.
kick rocks. As Dominic Cruz says, as Dominic Cruz says, I'm tired and I can't think about fighting right now.
Yeah, and then he calls out the Monster Energy drink guy, like Hans Mollenkamp.
Hey,
so at least he still called somebody
but
else.
then
Made
we-
headlines
but then-
for it.
but
But
then
that was
we
real.
could-
That was real.
But then we talk about how silly that was. But then everyone on the editorial team was like, "Did you see the numbers that this freaking comment did?" And then they go, "Jose, ask Dana White about Monster Energy drink." I'm like, "For what reason?" And they're like, "Oh, because it did a lot of traffic." I'm like, "Kick rocks, bro! Like, what are we talking about?"
No, but that's a separate thing though. Those numbers aren't like help us. They don't help a fighter. Of course, we're gonna want to boost that sort of stuff, but those don't help the fighter. They don't do anything for the fighter.
Got people
It's a
talking.
whole
about
different
it.
thing. Yeah.
You can ask about Kyle Dawkins.
That's true. His knees doing much better.
Or ask about
great story.
what chair would you slam someone's? What was the schmo question?
Oh,
They got him in all the. All right.
I didn't think that press conference was that controversial. Like everyone was freaking out about Dana White freaking out. I'm like, it's just Dana White, bro. I don't really care.
Yeah,
Just let him do his thing. I'm gonna go to sleep and wake up the same way.
we good? The only fight that matters is the early prelim main event. Paca Porta. Let's go.
They just wanted to hear you say it, Mike. They just wanted to hear you say it, Mike.
Paca Porta, John Jones 2. The road is on. Let's
It's
go.
happening. That's
Let's
the other
go.
fight.
He
Everyone-
set up right there. Parker Porter. Oh my god! If he wins and he calls out John Jones,
Everyone,
There's
go
a story
watch.
there.
There's you can go watch our video of the Welcome to the Country ceremony in Perth, Australia that I shot. You can see Parker Porter attempt an indigenous dance with Alex Volkanovski and the rest of the Aussies. It is
legend.
fantastic.
Okay.
He's a legend. Absolute legend. We'll see if Paca Porta Braxton Smith is going to rule. That is going to be a fun fight. Either Braxton's going to knock him out in 45 seconds or Parker's going to ground and pound TKO him in like the second round. It's going to be lovely.
It could actually also be like a super terrible fight, and I'm here for it.
and
How
super
dare
terrible
you?
fight.
It could be a
There's no
super
way that
terrible
fight can be terrible because if it's terrible, it's gonna be awesome. There's no.
It's funny,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so. Yeah.
I don't know because I know you guys all like Parker Porter for some reason. Well,
yeah.
I forgot.
For some
I mean,
reason.
I forgot. We love alliteration. He is every definition of the word. His fights are so unmemorable, and everyone remembers him just dying in there, like against Justin Thomas and Chris Dawkins. Can you name all of his wins in the UFC? Probably not, but you can
Only
name
'cause
how
I'm
he
staring
lost
at them.
all of them.
He puts on that pace, that cardio pace.
Yeah,
Doesn't
that-
slow
come on.
down. Doesn't gas out.
Yeah, Belal Muhammad has that Parker Porter cardio, right? That's what we're calling it.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's how we phrased it. Yeah.
Yeah. He's the legend. He's the
He
legend.
fought
All right,
Gabe Gonzaga once. That's random. That's weird.
Who hasn't
Sure
fought
he
Gabe
did.
Gonzaga?
Good
That's a
point.
great question, especially from the New England area. Yes, I've seen many Parker Porter fights in the regional scene, so it's very, very fun to see him in the UFC. And you'll see him tomorrow against Braxton Smith. What a story that guy is. So thank you very much for watching. We'll have the People's Pre-Fight Show. I believe it's at 5:45 p.m. Eastern time because we lost
So many fights.
another
yeah.
fight. We lost another fight on the scales today, or one before the scales, and 12 fights. So the prelim started at 6:30 p.m. Eastern now. So we'll go 5:45. Casey and I to answer all the questions we didn't get to today and more. And it's gonna be a fun time. Boots on the ground. We have the watch party 9:45 p.m. Eastern tomorrow with me, GC, Mysterious Frank. Jed's gonna watch co-main event, Chat GBT bet, and Rob Font. Rob Font will join us for the main event. So that'll be fun. I'm sure he'll be very interested to see what happens with this Aljamain Sterling Henry Cejudo fight. So get ready, everybody. Thank you for watching. For AK, for Casey, happy anniversary to him and Esther. For Jose, I am Mike Heck. We'll see you later on, everybody.